Staying with the New Year's Eve vibe, well, some will be partying up a storm and drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, but this often results in a huge hangover. We're now joined by CrossFit District 6 co-owner, this Tyron, to find out how to cure that massive headache from excessive drinking. Tyron, thank you for your time. I think this conversation is actually very important, understanding that we're about to cross over to 2020 now. But I just want to start off with this. Are we seeing more people, specifically in South Africa, consume excessive amounts of alcohol at this time of the year?
Yes, unfortunately, that is what happens now. Everyone's in this sort of festive holiday mood, and they get after it.
Yeah, and I mean, probably some would say that, there are tricks and, myths on how to, sort of cure your hangover. What do you think is the best way for people to deal with a hangover?
There's plenty of little tricks and things you can try and do. Unfortunately, the only thing that you can really do to not have that hangover is to not drink. But a couple of things you can do is to try and reduce the severity of the hangovers by drinking lower sugar content alcohol. So things like shots and all those kinds of drinks with a high sugar content are going to increase that rate of dehydration. So you're going to feel a little bit worse in the morning.
Yeah, and I mean, just take some precautions that we may think are obvious, but are very important to emphasize, especially if you'll be drinking alcohol. I mean, before we had this conversation, we saw some South Africans saying they don't plan on going out because perhaps they do know they'll be consuming alcohol, so therefore it will be safer just to keep indoors and not even drive, right?
Yes, definitely. I think doing something off the roads is always going to be your best bet. You might not be drinking, but other people will be. So that's always something that I try and do myself. I try and stay off the roads completely. I like to wake up feeling fresh on the first day of the year. But if you really are planning to go out, just really be safe. You don't know what other people are doing on the roads.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people actually are working on, either the 1st or even the 2nd of January. So we may think we're celebrating at midnight, but a couple of hours later, you need to be going to work. So then what do you do when you are in a festive mood, but at the same time, you need to be responsible enough to conduct yourself professionally at work?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, like I mentioned earlier, is to cut out the sugary drinks that's mixed with the alcohol. That's one. A nice little thing you can do is maybe have a glass of water between drinks. That's also going to limit your sort of hangover the next day by keeping you hydrated the whole time. Because obviously that's one of the biggest things of a hangover. You get that headache, you get thirsty. And by drinking that water, it's going to sort of limit that a little bit. Also, if you can limit it and you know that the next day you have to work, that's going to be a bit of a problem because obviously your sleep quality is quite badly impaired when you've been drinking. Try and get yourself a good breakfast first thing in the morning if you can. Try and eat beforehand as well. Get as many nutrients into your body as possible. And that's probably the best things you can do. Eat properly and then drink lots of water.
Yeah, and would you advise people to mix their alcohol beverages and spirits at all?
Without getting too deep into the scientific breakdown of different alcohols, you want to try and keep it to as pure a form as possible. Your vodkas and your gins and those kinds of things are going to leave you with less of a hangover because they've got less sort of bonding agents between the alcoholic molecules, if that makes sense.
All right.
So the purer forms is your best bet.
And I think the most important message is to absolutely drink responsibly this festive season. Thank you so much, Tyron, for joining us and giving us some tips there on how to, of course, deal with the hangover. Of course, not only if you are going to work, but just to make sure that your body is still intact and still in its healthiest form in 2020 so you can achieve all those resolutions.